Hello, and thank you for choosing this Analyst Insight podcast from the Information Security Forum. My name is Mark Ward. I'm a Senior Research Analyst at the ISF, and this podcast is one of several conversations we have had with CISOs and security leads, investigating their approach, their experiences, and getting their advice for anyone that's doing that job currently or thinks in the future they might take up that tricky role. And to discuss these topics, I'm joined by two veterans of security leadership. I hope you don't mind me calling you that. First is Patric Versteeg, who's currently CISO at Viterra. He's a very experienced CISO, security lead, who in a presentation at last year's Congress explored his career, the changes it inflicted on him, his approach to the role, and how that's changed as well. Hello, Patric.
Hi, Mark. So nice of you to invite me to this podcast. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. It should be a good discussion because we've got. I've done a bit of work on the role of the CISO, and it's always good to get views of folks in the field because my understanding is largely theoretical. But also here to help is Paul Watts, who's a distinguished analyst at the ISF, who before joining the forum fulfilled the CISO role at quite a few different companies, which treated him, if that's the word, to a wide variety of experiences. Hello, Paul.
I'm still debating whether I hang up right now after being rudely referred to as a veteran. I've still got all my own teeth, I'll have you know.
Well, I think you. I'm not sure how to defend myself against that, but I meant it in a nice way. Someone whose views I can trust and I would come to for. So it's not meant to be. Not a bad thing to be a veteran, to have survived so long. Yeah, can you hear me floundering there? Definitely.
I'm happy to see you again, Paul. It was nice to meet you at the conference as well last year. I had a blast. So
absolutely was. What a whirlwind that was, and absolutely looking forward to doing it all again in Rotterdam, I believe. So that will be great fun. You know where all the good bars are, I'm told. So
I know, and otherwise I can point you in the right direction. So that's great.
Amazing. That's all we needed to know. Well, we can end the podcast there, Mark.
We can. We wrap things up. Definitely. But yeah, I think because Congress last year was my first in-person one, having done a couple of virtual ones, and all the war stories and horror stories I got told turned out to be absolutely true. So I would encourage anyone that's thinking of going to Congress, definitely sign up, get down there, because you learn a lot, not about information security, but you certainly learn a lot.
Mark, I loved it so much I joined the company. What can I say? What better endorsement is there than that?
Yeah, you had to be on the inside. It's that good. So, like I say, I've been looking forward to this because I've done some work on the role of the CISO in the recent past, and the governance work I did throughout last year and towards the end of last year. Certainly, I got talking to quite a few security leads as well. And this year, the ISF is exploring the role as well. I think Paul definitely is going to be doing some work on leadership, just shaping that function, shaping the security function, and sort of how you go about being a modern CISO. So, and I think Patric as well, it'd be good to start with you and build on that presentation you did at Congress. There's a video of that on ISF Live, and if folks are interested, by all means, I'll put something in the show notes so people can go and find that. But it was a very brave presentation to do because it did lay out your experience as a CISO and how you got started. So if we can, go in at that early level, because you made it a point of getting lots of qualifications, I guess, with the idea that would just mean you were really good at the job because you knew everything about it. But it didn't quite work out like that. Was that broadly?
So I was a middle school dropout. Then went to work for a firm. I think it's still alive in the UK. It's called Dixon's, and I was a shopkeeper there. So and then after a couple of years, I thought it might be better to fit for me in IT, and so I went to in IT, and I did not have any proper qualifications, and my master's degree I obtained years later. So I thought, well, what should I do? And then I got acquainted with some IT certifications, like the Microsoft MCCs and the Cisco ones. And basically, in the end, I thought, well, it was the early 2000s. I want to be in security. I think that fits me the best. So I started to get security certifications, and then you get this hunger. You want more and more and more, and then you ramp up to more than 25 at the moment.
That's a lot of letters after your name, isn't it, really?
A bit too much. And it has been joked about as well, being a gimmick. Sometimes it is. So that's basically how I got started, how I got into the field. And my first job was being in the trenches. I call it the trenches of IT, where I just put switches and routers into 42U racks. I still have the scars on my fingers, getting cut on those balls that you use. So I come from hardcore IT, and I think for me, there lies the problem. Not only my problem, but I think the problem with most CISOs that we see at the companies. I don't want to overgeneralize, but what you mostly see is that these are people are coming from IT with an IT background. Call them the tech nerds, if you may. I'm definitely one of them. Still like my gadgets, and we do certifications which are technical certifications, and there's nothing that you need as a CISO for at the point in the world where we're not now. There's no training there, there's no education there to be a CISO for a company where we are in the world right now, let alone what we need to have for the future if we take an outlook to 2020, 2030, let's say.
Yeah. So Paul, I don't know if that was your experience, that just getting started in the business means getting those technical qualifications, and then people think, oh, that's all I need, and then they just keep going, or and that, like Patrick says, doesn't really fit them for what the role, those senior roles and what they've become.
It's an interesting one. So I am a fellow nerd. I love my technology. I was fortunate to be a child of the 80s when the revolution happened, and I look back really fondly at the journey that we all went on in the 80s. My interest was ignited in this field for a film that I think was 83, 84, which was War Games, starring Matthew Broderick, which was the whole premise that actually, that a misguided trust in technology might actually cause an apocalyptic event. Of course, this was in the Cold War, but actually, that career path wasn't really a thing unless you were in the military or whatever. It wasn't really a thing. So I started out as a bit of a data nerd. I was fascinated by data and information, but I didn't really kind of know what to do with that. And I started as I graduated. I was an operations research analyst, so I was into statistics and probability and mathematical models, working for the Automobile Association in the UK, and then went into consultancy, data warehousing, business intelligence. And it was only sort of around 2002, 2003, I was actually spending a bit of time in service management, where I kind of found myself creeping into an information security kind of role. And by 2005, I was head of information security for the UK's check clearing utility, and the transition completed. But I found myself doing, my early leadership roles falling back on two things. One, my technology experience, and two, the rule book. And whenever I was in difficulty, I would wave the rule book in the air and say, you may have your views, but you've got to comply with this. End of. It's financial services. So that was what I hid behind. But as I've furthered on in my career, I've started to recognize and nurture and appreciate more and more and more the importance and the significance of the soft skills that you don't get taught in technology training, that are not part of your badge collecting, but are absolutely essential for a security leader to win the hearts and minds of the board and the business, and to be able to further their cause. And that, I'm afraid to say, is quite a big blind spot with a number of security leaders who are very, very technical and have not been able to nurture some of those broader skills. I absolutely relate to what Patrick was saying.
And I want to comment on that it's not a number, but I think it's the vast majority that are lacking these kinds of skills. Hence the lot of complaining I see on hence a lot of complaining I see on LinkedIn, or the trainings that I see coming by, not being heard, not part of the C-suite books that are being written on that. Which sounds like a lot of complaining that's going on in the community on this topic as well.
But is there a question of competence here? Because having talked to a few CISOs, they have to walk a very fine line because on the one side, they have to maintain a certain amount of competence with the IT side, because they might be reporting to a CIO, and they do have to, they have to have a certain amount of familiarity with the technology the organization is using. And they have to be on the other side as well and translate some of that higher up or to other parts of the organization. So I guess again, it's not like either or, but I suppose what's lacking is any sense of any qualifications, or you can't get letters after your name for soft skills and things like that at the moment.
Well, I think that the problem that we see is, one is people tend to dive into a CISO role because it's well paid, and they think they can make a lot of money. And surely there are enough companies that pay very well for this role, but it should be a calling. With like most jobs, it's a calling. It's not that I'm doing this for the money, but obviously the money is good, but it's not the main driver. The main driver is that security in all its facets. It's in my body, it's in my veins, it's in my DNA. That's why I want to improve, and that's why if you come from the background up, you need to do something on those skills, and you need to know it's not a 9 to 5 job. You're doing this for 60 hours, 80 hours a week, and you get paid for 40. And if you come from the side because you think the money is good, yeah, being only in communication and marketing, or having a degree in art, and you're a good communicator, that's fine, but you need to understand the technology as well. It's a really tough and difficult job to do.
I just wanted to build on that a little bit, if I may,
Yeah.
Mark. I kind of get where you're coming from there. I absolutely adore working in cybersecurity. It has tried to kill me multiple times. I have been in situations where I have been pushed to the very limits, exiting major incident responses where I've got a throat infection, sinus infection, haven't slept, just an absolute train wreck. And there's a separate conversation that we should pick up about the strains and stresses of mental health in our industry. It is a real problem, but let's just park that for now.
Agree.
In my early days as a CISO, I used to get into a little bit of trouble with my boss and my boss's boss. And what they used to say to me is, Paul, you're a very passionate guy. We get it. We understand how much this means to you and how desperate you are to do the right thing by your organization. But what you lack is that EQ. Your passion comes across as aggression, and you've got to manage that. And that was probably one of the biggest and best pieces of advice I ever got. And this was kind of 2006, 2007-ish. And at that point, I realized that I could not just dine out on my technical skills to do what I wanted to do and make my mark in my business. I had to change the way that I approached it. And I started realizing that actually the business wasn't the problem. And this is an issue I think that a lot of our peers have. It's always the business's fault. Stand in the mirror and look at yourself and ask yourself, could you also be part of that problem? I reckon, I'm not blowing my own trumpet. I kind of recognized that I needed to be different. There was something missing. And over the years, I then started to build on that. I don't always get it right all of the time. We're just human. But that was a blind spot, and it was holding me back as a security leader.
But Paul, my story is quite similar, because I had these talks about 2010, roughly. And you and I have been very lucky to have some people to take us separately and tell us, listen, this is not working. I had a really nice guy, and I really like to mention his name because I'm forever grateful for doing that. His name is Bertjan Marais, and he took me apart and he said, listen, you should be on a baseline, but you're on the top of the line or you're under the line, but you're never on the baseline. So people don't know how you react or what you can do for the company. And it was fundamental for me that on that point, and shortly after that, I got fired from that assignment, not by Bertjan, but by somebody else, to start this learning process. But how many CISOs, how many people who are in this line of work had the chance or had somebody take them to the side and say, listen, what you're doing, you're a technical great guy, but your EQ, your SQ, it's just not working. And I think this is fundamental wrong with this whole certifications and educations track anyhow in our line of field, because we're missing that in the educations. And I don't want to ramble on, but I just took a look for this podcast, and don't want to do naming and shaming, but there's a university in the US who's going to start in June a great CISO track. Looks promising, but then if I look at what they're going to teach the CISO, threat intelligence, enterprise security, foundation in network security, understanding critical
Oh my day.
leveraging, cyber risk. Where are the core competences of the CISO in that track? And then if we take a look at the bigger companies in the world that put out big certifications, where are those types of understanding and knowledge, personal leadership, communication, marketing, where are those in those tracks? I'm missing them, Mark.
Bang on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because certainly again, harking back to the governance work, and there was, I interviewed a lot of people for that, and the people who underwent a similar conversion to you guys, in that they realized there was a different way it had to be done. And I'm sure in a lot of cases it wasn't very pleasant for them, and it is quite a self-reflective, deep and difficult moment, I think, as well. But it worked, and they were much happier on the other side, because it definitely made a difference to the way they could do the job and how effective they could be. But are we saying that everybody has to suffer, or is it a case of, well, there are ways to pass these lessons on without people having to go through some potentially, like you say, difficult experiences?
So let me just, maybe I'll answer that in a slightly different way, if I may. So yesterday afternoon, I guest lectured at a university in the Midlands. Actually, it was where I got my computing degree, so I was paying it forward, and happy to do so. And I said something to the students, which was, your academic understanding of a subject is a foundation, but your ability to apply that knowledge is a skill that can't be taught. It's a skill that has to be acquired through experience. That experience will sometimes require you to get it wrong and get it right. And in an ideal situation, you will be in a nurturing environment that will support you on that learning journey. But the reality of the situation is that not all organizations work like that. So sometimes you need to kind of be on your own. And if you haven't got that experience close to home in your organization, the value and importance of that peer network to kind of compare notes with other people is absolutely critical. But what I want you to hear is this: you cannot walk out of this university with a scroll under your hand and be an effective security leader, or anything else for that matter, because experience is what allows you to do that job well. And in the security world, we have come from a heritage that the only experience you needed was technical. And the universities don't teach or give you that shepherd's warning that the sum of all of its parts includes all the soft skills that you want. I said it to the lecturer afterwards. We had lunch afterwards, and I said, these students need to be being taught presentation skills, managing confrontation. They need to be being taught emotional intelligence, how to read a room, stakeholder management. I can't see that in any of those. And I'm absolutely distressed to hear Patrick talking about that other syllabus over in the States, because all of that is doing is setting the future security leader up for failure. We need to address that. We absolutely need to address that.
I fully agree. You couldn't be more right. You couldn't be more right.
So if we're building a toolkit of the modern CISO, I guess, at the bottom layer you've got those technical skills, and then you have a lot of mistakes to make, or are there ways to build these up, or just what you need a good environment for that? And I guess the question I'm asking is that environment starting to emerge? Like I said, I think the ISF's concentration on this, focus on this, is dead right, and hopefully will make a difference. But I wonder if there's other ways to get this.
I think there's several things to it. One CISO is not the other CISO. So what you call a CISO at company A is not the CISO at company B. And sometimes you need a CISO who is really tech-minded and really transactional based, tit for tat. There are also CISOs at huge Fortune 500 companies that are able to not be so technical anymore and need those leadership skills. So it's not really black and white. The thing only is that if you have there are maturity models for this as well, and I think there is a very nice model from Kavue, the CISO and risk officer model. It's the 0 model, and that's a model that also divides CISOs in level 1 until level 5. And where the levels go up in level 5 on technical skills, they also should go up when it comes to these leadership skills. So that's one. I think for CISOs, attending, for instance, peer conferences is a good idea, but they should be really picky on where they go. I normally don't attend conferences in the Netherlands. Obviously, the ISF I will go, but other smallers I just don't go because it's mostly technical oriented. Mostly, why doesn't the board listen to me? And then they come with some kind of risk management reporting or some KPIs or things like that. And basically, I think it's quite easy. Start with embedding communication and marketing training into the curriculum of the CISO. If you start with that, you definitely ramp up to level 3, level 4 CISOs. Next step is personal leadership. And from the ISF, we could make a great list of books just to read. A True North is a great book. There are other great books out there as well that you can just read. And if you understand what they mean and what they would mean to your job, you can improve and granular grow into that level 5 end state CISO, the trusted advisor.
I guess as well, it's not like this is training that you can't find elsewhere. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of broader business training around leadership, around marketing communication. So it's not like CISOs can't find this. It's just they don't, the qualifications don't give it to them. And
I'm getting my CISSP, I'm getting my CISO, I'm getting my system or C-risk or CISA or God knows what, and then I'm done. No, that's your technical security hardcore skills, and then the journey starts. Interpreting, just what Paul said, interpreting what you learned, and if you learn it from a certification body, or if you learn it in high school or you learn it in university, what you've learned, using leadership skills, communication skills, marketing skills, and use that to bring it to the company.
When we were in lockdown during the pandemic, I was the CISO of a multinational organisation that had just divested from a bigger organisation. And I think if there was any situation where I kind of thought, thank goodness that Bob Wright, his name was, by the way, Yorkshireman, who was my IT director back in the day, and he's the man I kind of credit with dropping that penny. And if you're out there, Bob, eternally grateful, because it was very important that I heard that message. But I was finding that what I would normally do by wandering about, I couldn't do anymore. I was locked in a little box room in Milton Keynes, which is where my base is, and I was having to do all of that through Teams. And I drew down on kind of everything I knew to kind of make friends and influence people. I was basically selling security through a video camera, and no conversations about. I mean, the technology conversations were helping elsewhere, but the baseline was I had to form this body of interest that this was important. But I couldn't buy them a coffee. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't. It was really, really difficult. And I kind of thought back and thought, if I was an out and out technical person, I would have had nowhere to go in that situation. I would have absolutely fallen flat on my face. And it just kind of reminded me of that situation that I found myself in. The other thing I would say actually on that is where a security team in the eyes of the business is failing, there's usually something that's quite relevant that sticks out. If you ask those people, when was the last time they took an active interest in the business, you will be very surprised at the answers that you will get back sometimes. If a security team is buried in the basement and they're just pushing paper around a desk and they're just talking to the SOC and they're in IT and they don't understand why the company exists, what its missions are, what its core values are, what it's trying to do in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, if you don't understand any of that, how can you show any empathy to the same business when you're saying, I need to take your systems down to patch them, or I need you to do this bit of training on ransomware, or I need you to behave in a different way? How can you expect the business to take you seriously if you can't relate to what they do or empathize? And it sounds so obvious, but a security team that is just insular and looking inwards offers no value to a broader business. And I think that's equally another part of the problem.
And what I would like to challenge you on, Paul, is on this vision, buried in the basement. So who buried who in the basement? I can't imagine a company where you say, well, I'm in this company and I want to know what makes this company tick. I want to know how HR works. I want to know how sales works. I want to know how procurement works. I don't think there's any leader that will prohibit you, any executive who prohibit you to go out in the company and spend some hours, because it's not weeks of work, it's just an hour here and there to better understand how a company ticks.
Yeah, why would that be a bad thing? Because I suppose just to look at the positive side of this, the fact that CISOs need these skills, I guess, should be a recognition that the business is starting to rely on them and does want them to do it. And unfortunately, some people are coming up wanting because they don't have the qualifications. They have the experience, but they haven't quite internalized it, realized what it's given them yet.
The reality of it is, though, Mark, is to Patric's point, the only thing that was limiting them from sitting in that basement and not getting out and seeing the real world was them. It was all in their heads. Nobody was stopping them going out and doing that. Look, there is a modicum of excuse here, and this is a very tenuous modicum of excuse. Information security, IT security, IT. And if you kind of work that back, that's why our origins are in technology. And so, some organizations haven't struggled to break free from that. Technology used to be business supporting, then it became business enabling, then it became the business. So as that journey has emerged, you've kind of gone away from the basement where it's, what do you want? Here you are, go away, to a, how can I help you do that job better, to, I'm doing that job for you. So as we've gone on that journey of technological innovation and how it's kind of emerged in that way, the security teams kind of rode the coattails of that, when is actually what they should have been doing is getting way out in front and looking at how they enable good business. Now, just as a little bit, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. So as part of the leadership and strategy track, I'm just starting a piece of high-level research on how we make security a business opportunity. Spoiler alert, the paper is going into a lot of the topics that we are discussing here, because actually it's not just about the business changing and adapting, it's also about discarding some of our heritage and thinking differently about the job that it is that we do. And some of that requires us to be marketeers, it requires us to be salesmen, it requires us to be innovative, it requires us to be concessionary, to be mediators, to concede a bit of ground, to win a bit more ground. And these are the sorts of things that we're going to surface in the paper. And if people want to get involved in that research, please reach out to me at the ISF. I would love to hear your thoughts on how we build this up. But it starts with us, I'm afraid to say. We have to make the first move.
So Paul, my head is again running wild on all the information I'm getting now. And for me, the basics come back to the presentation I gave last November. Because what I hear is this victimized person or department in a basement where it's dark and you can come out at 5 o'clock and you go in at 8:30 and they lock the door, something like that. And yeah, so for me it comes back to 3 core competences. One being a creator, create things around you, create a team, create a buzz, create a vibe, create documents, anything that comes into mind to being creative and outgoing, create relationships, create pacts, create communication channels, those kind of things. So that's one. The other one is being the coach, coaching the organization, helping them to learn, to understand, be a teacher, be a front runner, be a spokesperson, be out there, walk through the building with a cup of coffee in your hand in the morning and not sit behind your desk reading your paper, but just going there and have a talk with them. And the third thing is for me the challenger. So I'm coming back to my presentation on the empowerment dynamic. Challenge the company, challenge yourself, challenge your teams, challenge everybody on security. And not by saying no, but how can I help you to get better? How can I help the company to move forward whilst maintaining security?
So it's kind of a case of, if I was to sum all of that up, I think it is as simple as you need to be a business leader. You need to be a leader, and people will then follow you, be they your direct reports, your big broader community, and the business itself. If you lead, they'll follow. If you inspire, people will be inspired. It sounds so simple, yet we continually fail to do it.
Yeah, but I think it is. I mean, it is difficult because I imagine a lot of people, certainly just thinking about my time as a journalist, and my value as a journalist was solely because of the people I knew. My contacts book was the best thing about me. I can write a few things quite fast, and my shorthand was pretty good as well. But I think, but at the start of my career, it was very much, what do I know about the subject? And by the end, it was who do I know and what do they know? Because it wasn't, that was the important part of it. And I think, again, for just to sum up, because I'm conscious of time, that it is that difficult journey that CISOs have to go on. I think in some respects, so security leads have to try and find their way within their organization, which will be, because their organizations are difficult, dynamic entities, and each one is different, has their own character, their own culture, their own history. But I think there is definitely very much a personal side to this that we're absolutely going to explore.
I think the most personal side on this, that you need to be vulnerable. You need to admit to yourself that you're failing. And when you admit that you're failing, there's room for improvement. And we're not in the early 2000s anymore that you only meet people at conferences that were announced in a newspaper. You can just reach out to on LinkedIn, search for a CISO, see somebody on his profile that he or she is very successful, and just ask them to help you. It's as easy as that. You have an app on your phone called LinkedIn, have a blast. But you need to be vulnerable. You need to reach out to a fellow peer and say, listen, I'm failing on this subject. Can you help me?
The only other thing I would say amongst all of this, it makes it sound like everything is on. So we do have a case for change. I think we've absolutely done that. But change is a two-way street. We still have challenges in the boardroom. We still carry the burden of our business on our shoulders, and we make it easy for them to discharge that burden upon the security faculties within an organization. So there is still work that needs to be done to get the business to recognize that security is a collective responsibility, and it isn't something that you outsource or discharge to a guy or girl called the CISO. So there is still a little bit of work that needs to be done there, and I am watching with interest how the US attitudes change with the SEC's attempts to say, boardrooms, you can no longer play the plausible deniability card that you do not understand. This is very much where we were in 2000 with Sarbanes-Oxley. Boardrooms need to recognize that this is something they need to understand and they need to take responsibility for. And at that point, I think we start to unlock that kind of two-way street traffic. If we can then think about how we change to better support our business and blend those soft skills with those technical skills we've honed for many, many years, I think we can start to move things in the right direction.
Yeah, excellent. This has been a fabulous discussion. Thanks, folks. Really have drawn on your experiences. Really good. Really great stuff. Thanks to everyone for listening as well. You can now find ISF podcasts on all major podcast platforms. Look at the show notes for our page on Audio Boom, where you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. The podcasts are also available at securityforum.org on ISF Live, where you can also learn more about ISF research, tools, and